Hey guys, my name's James Sommerville. I'm the VP of Design at Coca Cola, and actually before I was at Coke I spent pretty much all my career in the UK, originally from Huddersfield in Yorkshire, and before Coke I had a design agency. 1 minute. Wouldn't be the same if I didn't have a bottle of Coke with me, right? So just to give you a little heads up, I had an agency called Attic, and we ran that for like 25 years. We had shops in London, in San Francisco, New York, Sydney at one point. And kind of that led me to Coke, because Coke were a client whilst at Attic, and so I've been at Coke 3 years, and we're doing some interesting things. And one of the things that worried me when I took the job is like, what can you bring? But it's a very progressive, it cannot stand still, it cannot rest on its laurels. It's a much more competitive marketplace out there. Even though it's number one as a beverage, as a soda, it's still got to keep working hard, and design plays a huge role in that. So our team touches everything from, as you might imagine, packaging, experiential, so from bricks and mortar, kind of like what we call the perfect serve, all the way through to equipment, licensed products, fashion products, the workplace. We've designed the office. We're involved in communicating and teaching modules to our entire marketing organisation about design thinking. So design is a really kind of broad subject at Coca Cola, and very rich. So as a designer, that pleases me. If you're a designer watching this, I hope that pleases you, because when a company like Coke holds design in such high regard, I think that's good for all of us. I think that's good for our industry. It's certainly good for our team here at Coca Cola, and ultimately I believe it will be good for the brand. And so we are around in another 100 years, and I think design will play a key role in that success of the future of Coke as well. One of the things I really enjoy and love to do, but I think it's strategically important, is not forget our past. So we've got a very, very extensive archives at Coke. You can imagine 120 or 30 years of marketing. It's all down there in our basement cellar. It's just this treasure trove to a designer. It's unbelievable. If any of you guys are ever out in Atlanta, then just give me a call and I'll take you down there. We do draw a lot of inspiration from down there, but what's important is it's not just about creating work from our past and talking about heritage and all the great decades, but it's actually about learning and understand what the company did in its early years and its kind of like midpoint in the 50s and the 60s, what made it a success back then, and how can we kind of like take that and reinterpret that into something that is very relevant to a consumer today. So we're not just kind of regurgitating old work, but we draw strategic insights. We talk about design thinking, which is another question I'll talk about, but Coke's been design thinking for 130 years. So kind of like, how can we take some of that and make it amazing for tomorrow? Make it different, actually. But actually, if you look close, there's a dotted line to something that happened in our past. So we really enjoy that, and we don't believe in totally reinventing the wheel. I think companies get bored very quickly of their own voice, so they constantly strive to do something different, year in, year out, especially at a company like Coke. It's a continuous machine of marketing. But I think it's not about reinventing the wheel all the time. It's about taking what you did last year or 10 years ago and actually just kind of evolving it, taking it to a new place. I'm going to taste the feeling. Traditionally, I think designers, and maybe you included, do not necessarily become directly involved in a traditional advertising campaign. I think what is groundbreaking about an organisation like Coca Cola today is this kind of crossover between the communication creative teams. So the design team, and I was asked to kind of lead the print execution for the new Coca Cola campaign, Taste Feeling. So what does that encompass? Outdoor, to a degree, that lands on digital as well. It does go through to shopper marketing. It does appear on packaging, but ultimately it's a photographic assignment to really try and capture the spirit of the new campaign in stills. So rather than as kind of like traditionally we may have engaged with an agency and they go and shoot that, we really wanted to own the project within the design team. So we engaged with an art director from an agency, we engaged with the photographer, we ran the production, we ultimately shot the campaign almost like we are the agency. And I think that in itself is a new way of working within a large corporation. It's not that we don't want agencies involved, but I think we are much closer to the brand. We are much closer to where we strategically want to be, and ultimately we can set the kind of visual tone through our photographer and our art direction. So Taste the Feeling, if you look at some of the shots, you know, these shots that you're seeing right now, it's got the storytelling of a Norman Rockwell. Things are going on in these shots that maybe you don't see first time, but you see second or third time. But it feels very spontaneous. It feels very kind of immediate and of the moment, and very real. And as Coke like to be, always authentic. So kind of like that hybrid between yesteryear in the Rockwell inspiration, but also very current today, I hope, and something that I think young adults and teenagers will say, well, that could be me and my friends. I want to hang out like that. And obviously Coke is central to that. One of the things that we make sure is that Coca Cola is centre stage. Because if you take the Coca Cola away, maybe that moment, that wonderful moment that these guys are having, wouldn't quite be the same. So the role that the brand plays in the photography is hugely important. And of course, we want to make it look delicious, etc., etc. One of the things you will not always see is a full bottle of Coke. You know, we play with the liquid level immensely. You know, the president of our North American business unit said to me once, there's only one thing better than a bottle of Coke, and that's an empty bottle of Coke, because it's there to be drunk. So I think the iconic shape of the glass bottle, even when empty, or what we call the last sip, which might be like half an inch, is actually in itself kind of a great piece of design. Ultimately, what we wanted to try and do is to create an identity on our packaging that resembles all Cokes are the same. So rather than building sub-brands, like Coke Zero is a sub-brand, we want Zero Sugar to be a variant within the Coke portfolio. So if you don't want sugar, that's fine. And if you want kind of like a sugar or a sweetener that's made out of stevia, then the life one would be the option. So we're creating this kind of like a family of one Coca Cola. We call it the one brand strategy. But there are choices within that portfolio. So we're not building individual brands anymore, we're building Coca Cola. So what you're going to see is over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, all the packaging is going to migrate to being red. Because red is ultimately the equity of the brand. And so by 2020, 2025 and beyond my time, I hope we'll walk down the beverage aisle in the supermarket, in your local Tesco's or wherever, and because we are a red brand again, doesn't matter what variants we introduce in the future, they'll always be red. So we'll have a kind of, if you want to call it a billboard effect at retail. We'll leverage our colour, we'll leverage our brand, and we won't dissect it into these kind of black brand for Zero and a silver brand or a green brand, and all of a sudden, you know, kind of got this very disparate kind of palette. So it really is about creating one umbrella brand, and actually within there you have choices. You have choices based on your sweetener, and maybe there's going to, in our new innovation, there'll be flavour choices as well in the future, but that's to come. So we're really kind of building this identity system for the next 50 years. Interestingly, let me just get a pack. So here's a can, right? So we all recognise this, something we did a couple of years ago. And the Zero can now is going to move to that. And Coca-Cola Life is going to move to that. And Light is going to move to that. Certainly in 10 years and in 20 years. So when our children's children are enjoying a Coca-Cola in their teenage college dorm, wherever it is, by 20, 30 or 40, we won't be around, but they'll be buying into Coca Cola. They'll be buying into one Coca Cola, and they won't have the kind of history of Coke Zero as a black packaging or a silver packaging for Coca Cola Light. So it's a long-term play for us, and we're in the kind of like stages now of building that. For me as a designer, to be part of that, the generation that are doing this, of course, it's a huge chapter in the history of the brand, and we hope and we believe that it will set the brand up for success over. It's 130 years old now. We want it to be around in 130 years from now, and I think this is a key component to ensuring that that will happen. Of course, I mean, when it comes to design thinking, the buzzword, I guess, although it's been around for 10 years, I do believe it's still in its infancy. And I think as a designer, and maybe yourself included, there's a process that we go through as designers that's almost intuitive. We were probably just born that way. We crafted that into a profession, and that's the way we operate. I think where design thinking can really benefit a broader population, and there's an important fact here for me is, when we teach design thinking to marketeers, what we're trying to do is really share a kind of a creative process with them. Importantly though, what it's not about, in my opinion, is teaching marketeers how to design. Design needs to stay with designers, people like us. We are the designers who will kind of create the final piece. We will craft it, we will make it beautiful, we will make it absolutely amazing, and our consumers hopefully will love it. But design thinking is just that kind of like process, that more creative process, to allow people to problem solve. Whether it's, you know, and the 5-step process is a process that everybody knows about, but it's just that idea of kind of guiding people, because there's so many, let's call them hot houses, brainstorming sessions, igniter this, and every corporation in the world does it. It's just not packaged in a way that is kind of collective. So design thinking at Coca Cola is really gaining momentum, and we're really pleased to be able to bring that to our broader population. You know, I just want to make it clear to myself, my team, and you know, we are not about turning non-designers into designers. That's a different process. But I think the two together, design thinking and then the design craft, design execution, maybe you call it design doing, those two hand in hand are, I think, super powerful. When I first arrived at Coke, one of the things that struck me was we were not allowed, contractually, it's not that we weren't allowed, and we, you know, but contractually we couldn't engage with individuals like creatives, like a typographer, an animator, an illustrator, a freelancer, because the company wasn't geared up like that. So working with the amazing team here, the legal team and the agency management team, we created a kind of a contractual situation where we can go direct to talent. So whilst we still have an amazing kind of list of agencies and global agencies and partners, I believe the future of an organisation as big as Coke is also about engaging with individuals. Individuals who, quite honestly, might work from their bedroom, or they might work from Starbucks. It doesn't really matter to us where they work. They may be a solo act, but they're just absolutely, you know, the best at what they do. So what we're really trying to do is build an ecosystem of partners where we have agencies, global agencies, because of the size of the organisation, we need that muscle. But also we have very amazing specialists, and connecting in new ways. So we often have kind of mashup projects where we'll give 15 or 20 designers a budget and a brief, and ask them to do something around maybe a certain subject that is important to us. It could be music, it could be about summer, it could be about any other occasion. So effectively what we're doing is we're opening our doors to individuals, and once we kind of like, you know, engage with them, there can be some very rich material comes from that. It could be socially very strong for us and for the artists as well. It's all about making sure for us. I mean, the roots of Coca Cola, If you go back 100 years, the founders and the original, when it started to grow, one of the important things about working in the Coca-Cola system is you had to make a buck. Whether you're a bottler, a retailer, you have a store, and you sell Coke. We have that philosophy today, and I do too. If you work with Coca-Cola, we want you to make a buck. We want to promote you. We want to take unknown, emerging talent and promote that, so the rest of the world can see it, but also Coca-Cola can engage with that individual on a contractual level. So it's really important as a kind of an ecosystem that we provide the opportunity for designers to grow, both as individuals, as small startups, also as mature organizations. So for us, that's a kind of a huge ambition. And then we get into collaboration. Then we get into kind of sharing. I think the future of agencies out there, if you're running an agency, is not about going away for a month and then presenting this deck or this PowerPoint or this keynote back to your client, and your client just sits there like this. It's about this continual dialogue, sharing files, sharing artwork. We know the brand better than you. You know the outside world better than us. So the idea is that if we can actually bridge that and make that work together, we'll get to a solution quicker. I think the old-fashioned way of just going away for, like I say, a month and then coming back with a linear PDF to present to a client, honestly, I think those days are numbered. So, you know, certainly at Coke, we're working in these new ways where we engage early, we're very interactive with the work, we guide the agency or the individual, we bring in freelancers, we bring in specialists, we glue it all together, and ultimately, I believe we'll do the best work in a decade. That's my goal, and I think working that way enables us not only to kind of like show off and give a stage to new emerging talent, but also, you know, let's be honest, commercially, we want great work. We want the greatest work we've ever done, and I believe working that way will do that. I did a talk a while ago about what can Coca-Cola learn from the Beatles, which you may think has got no relation, but I think when I look at the Beatles, particularly, I had a personal connection there as well, but I see innovation, I see constantly wanting to reinvent themselves, I see them swimming in the opposite direction to everybody else. You know, so and obviously now, you know, the history books tell us, and the songs themselves, they are timeless, they are iconic, they are a brand, not a band. They're both. But ultimately, I think this idea of disruption, continuous disruption, never being satisfied with what they're doing, constantly bringing in new musical instruments, for example, bringing in musicians, for example, that kind of do interesting things, and like building that into the way they wrote and they performed and they kind of like recorded. Companies have to be exactly like that. And this is not just a Coca-Cola thing, it's everybody. So for me, you know, we can use the Beatles as a kind of an example because everybody, in theory, knows about the Beatles. They've read the book, they've seen the kind of seen the movie, whichever way you look at it. Certainly listened to the music. Organisations have to be like that, and particularly large organisations. So if large organisations cannot be nimble, cannot experiment, cannot bring new things into the way they think, the way they act, then ultimately they'll cease to exist. I'm sure that would be the outcome. So we at Coca-Cola, I believe, can learn a lot from that type of an organisation, if I call the Beatles an organisation. There were very much of this kind of like Kickstarter meets startup, meets kind of like creativity, meets great product, meets continually reinventing, disrupting. They're the full package, right? And I think I personally draw down a lot of inspiration from not just their music, but actually looking at the way they operated. And of course their product at the end of the day was amazing. Just like I believe Coke's is. It's the best, in my view, and in millions of people's view, it's the best soda in the world. But we'll only keep doing that, and the actual Coke won't change, but it's the packaging around it. packaging in a holistic sense, the way we present that to market, that needs to continually reinvent and disrupt itself. Okay, last question, big question. I think I touched on a few things. I think in terms of making innovation leader. To me, so if I widen it to leadership, I think leadership is about, in many ways, it's about timing, good timing or bad timing. And we're quite often, none of us are in control of that, but timing is key for either growing the team, launching a product as a leader. Coca Cola is a leader in its sector, or just running a team. So timing. I think it's also about tenacity. I think having run my own agency, and you're probably in a very similar position. You have to wake up on those days that you don't want to go into the office, you don't want to kind of turn up in front of your team, and you actually just got to keep going, keep fighting it, because you will have all those kind of like down moments, and that's fine, because I think that's actually what makes the great moments even greater. I think it's definitely about teamwork. Bringing people in who just want to work in silos is absolutely not what it's about. So it comes back to collaboration, I guess. It's a kind of a bit of a cliched work, the teamwork work, but it does actually make a big difference. So I think ultimately leadership for me is about teaching. I'm throwing the T's out, they're just coming to my mind. My responsibility at Coca Cola is to make sure that I pave the way for the person who will take my job over. So rather than being all kind of like, I don't want anybody taking my job, somebody will take my job over, and my responsibility is to make sure that that individual or those individuals are ready for that role, and ultimately bring further success to Coca Cola. Because I think the thing I've noticed about working in an agency, my own agency, you're kind of very protective over everything, and you kind of, when somebody leaves or resigns, okay, you need to get out very quick. I think in an organisation like Coke, you see this very human cycle of, we are probably the sixth or maybe the seventh generation in charge of this great brand, but there'll be an eighth, and there will be a ninth and a tenth. And so we have a responsibility to not do just great work whilst we're in the seat, but also to get a team ready for the next generation. And I think that's one of the great lessons I've learned at Coca Cola, is that I'm just passing through, really. I'll be here for a certain length of time. I'll do hopefully the best work of my career, but my responsibility is to make sure that the next generation is really going to kind of sweep straight into it and do even better work than I did, and so on and so on. So I think leadership to me in the broadest sense, and that could be classed as innovation as well. Leadership is about maybe getting all those things together that I mentioned, and I think when the stars align like that, I think you can leave it in a better place than when you joined it, and the next person in my seat hopefully will think the same way as well. So I hope, I've rambled on a little bit, but I hope that was, interestingly enough, you didn't kind of like switch off. Happily, I'll do it again. If you guys are over in Atlanta, if anybody's passing through, give me a call. You might just want to go see the archives, and I'll definitely love to connect with you guys again next time I'm in London. Thank you very much. Cheers, by the way.